When we think of Canada, most of us picture polite people, snowy mountains, and maple syrup. But what if we told you that not every American state sees Canada in such a friendly light? In fact, some states have built up real frustration toward their northern neighbor, over jobs, culture, politics, and more. And no, it's not just border states. In this video, we're diving into 10 U.S. states that dislike Canada the most in 2025. And the reasons might just surprise you. Some are funny, some are serious. But all of them reveal a side of cross-border tension you've probably never considered. Stick around. You'll be shocked to learn about the last state on this list. Number 1. Maine. Maine shares more than just a border with Canada. It shares ecosystems, fishing zones, and a long history of territorial water disputes. For decades, lobster fishermen from Maine and their Canadian counterparts in New Brunswick have butted heads over who has rights to fish in contested areas like the Gray Zone. While the rest of the U.S. sees lobster as a delicacy, Mainers see it as a lifeline. So when Canadian vessels drop traps in areas Maine considers its own, it's not just irritating, it's seen as an invasion of livelihood. The issue goes beyond the sea. Cross-border logging and disputes over maple syrup branding have stirred deeper frustrations about economic fairness. Many Mainers feel Canada gets more benefit out of the partnership than they do. In public hearings, there have even been sarcastic remarks like, "Why don't we just rename our coast Nova Scotia South and be done with it?" Even tourism has become contentious. When gas prices rise or pandemic rules shift, locals blame the Canadian influence. There's a subtle but very real defensive pride here. While no one in Maine wants a hostile relationship with Canada, many are tired of being the quiet neighbor constantly overlooked and undercut. Number 2, Alaska. Alaska is massive, remote, and fiercely independent, and its 1,500-mile border with Canada doesn't always help with that. One of the biggest friction points is the transit dependence. To drive from mainland U.S. to Alaska, you have to pass through British Columbia and the Yukon. For some Alaskans, that's a major source of resentment. Why should they have to cross international lines just to reach their own state? Things get even tenser when you look at environmental policy clashes. Alaska is known for its resource-driven economy: oil, mining, and commercial fishing. But Canada's stricter regulations often block or influence projects that Alaskans believe should be theirs to control. One particularly heated debate involves cross-border river pollution, with Alaskans blaming Canadian mining operations for contaminating salmon streams, and Canadians pushing back with their own accusations. Alaskans don't want lectures from Ottawa about how to manage their wilderness. As one resident put it during a town hall, "We're not here to ask permission from a country that doesn't even shovel their sidewalks properly." Harsh words? Maybe. But they reflect the growing feeling that Canada's bureaucratic mindset is incompatible with Alaska's rugged way of life. Number 3, Texas. Texas isn't shy about having opinions, and in 2025, Canada's energy policies are squarely in the Lone Star State's crosshairs. The U.S. pulled out of the Keystone XL pipeline years ago, but the resentment still lingers. Texans see Canada's approach to green energy and international oil diplomacy as not just naive, but dangerous to American energy dominance. As Canada ramps up its environmental rhetoric, many in Texas feel like their way of life is being vilified. "We're not destroying the planet," one Houston oil exec said recently. "We're powering it." And when Canadian politicians criticize U.S. fossil fuel exports, Texans take it personally. The disdain isn't just political, it's cultural. Texans pride themselves on individual freedom, low regulation, and economic swagger, all of which they feel are undermined by what they call Canada's passive-aggressive progressivism. Jokes about maple syrup subsidies and apology quotas have even made it into political rallies. You can laugh, but that tension is real. Number 4, Wisconsin. At first glance, Wisconsin and Canada seem like twins. Cold winters, lots of dairy, polite people. But look closer, and you'll find a simmering frustration among Wisconsin's dairy farmers, who feel like they're being squeezed out of their own industry. Canada's supply management system, where the government controls dairy prices and imports, is seen as a blatant barrier to free trade. When Canada restructured its milk pricing system, it essentially pushed American dairy out of the market. For small and mid-sized farms in Wisconsin, this wasn't just economic policy, it was personal betrayal. Local co-ops have held meetings specifically to address Canadian milk dumping, and political representatives have demanded stronger retaliation from Washington. There's also a cultural divide. Many Wisconsinites feel Canada tries to claim the moral high ground, pretending to be more ethical, more sustainable, more wholesome, while actively protecting their own industries with an iron fist. It's not hatred, but it's absolutely irritation. And that's only deepened in 2025. Number 5. Michigan. Michigan and Ontario may look friendly on the map, separated only by lakes and bridges, but dig into the Great Lakes water wars, and you'll find deep-seated tensions. In recent years, Canada has pushed hard to enforce strict environmental policies regarding water usage, prompting backlash from Michigan industries that rely on those same waters for transport, manufacturing, and even tourism. But perhaps more sensitive is the issue of auto manufacturing. Detroit, the heart of the American auto industry, has long seen competition from Canadian plants as a threat. With U.S. automakers expanding across the border for cheaper labor and better tax breaks, many Michiganders blame Canada for siphoning off jobs while pretending to be partners. And then there's hockey. You wouldn't think it matters, but in Michigan, it does. From youth leagues to professional rivalries, tensions over league rules, aggressive players, and tournament politics have made Canadians something of a sporting villain in local lore. The deeper truth? Michigan feels like the ignored sibling in a cross-border relationship, doing the heavy lifting while Canada gets the praise. Number 6. Vermont. Vermont and Quebec, a tale of cultural closeness and quiet cultural resentment. On paper, the two regions should get along fine. They share French heritage, rural beauty, and progressive values. But ask Vermonters, and they'll tell you about a very different experience. One common complaint is about Canadian second home buyers driving up real estate prices in Vermont towns. With remote work on the rise, many Canadians have flocked to scenic U.S. areas, snapping up homes, inflating the market, and making it harder for locals to afford housing. It's like being priced out by someone who doesn't even live here full-time, a Burlington resident said. There's also tension over cross-border shopping, where Canadian tourists come to Vermont, take advantage of favorable prices or tax breaks, and leave, without investing in the community. Some Vermonters feel used, like a weekend getaway that gets no love the rest of the year. Add to that some Quebecois arrogance, or at least the perception of it, and there's a growing sense that cultural overlap isn't the same as cultural appreciation. Number 7. North Dakota. North Dakota's frustrations with Canada run deep in the agricultural economy. Canadian grain subsidies and export practices have long undermined American wheat prices, sparking anger among farmers who feel like they're playing by the rules and still losing. It's like they get a head start, and we get a lecture, one farmer said. The border itself is another issue. Long stretches of land are poorly monitored, and North Dakotans often complain about uneven customs enforcement. Canadian trucks get through faster, while American farmers face more red tape. There's a growing belief that Canada gets the benefit of open trade, without having to deal with the full weight of U.S. regulations. Even socially, there's tension. North Dakota is conservative and rural. Many locals find Canada's politics too far left and too vocal about it. When Canadian media outlets comment on American policy, especially gun laws or abortion, North Dakotans often see it as condescending interference. For many here, Canada isn't just a neighbor. It's a nagging neighbor who watches your lawn but never mows their own. Number 8. Montana. Montana and Alberta might share cowboy culture and open skies, but recent years have strained that neighborly bond. One of the biggest sore spots is related to tourism and land conservation. Canadian tourists often flood into Glacier National Park and nearby areas during peak months, but locals say they don't always respect the rules or the culture. Montana ranchers have also expressed concerns about Canadian cattle imports, which they say undercut prices without meeting the same health standards. During trade negotiations, Montana's representatives have lobbied hard to put tariffs on Canadian beef, arguing that Canadian policies create unfair advantages. Even environmental efforts have sparked anger. When Canada criticized certain Montana mining operations for polluting downstream water that eventually flows north, many Montanans saw it as hypocrisy. Don't pollute our rivers, they say, but they've got their own mess. There's mutual admiration between some cross-border communities, but a deeper current of suspicion runs underneath. Many Montanans feel Canada wants all the benefits of proximity, without sharing the burden. Number 9. New York. You might be surprised to see New York on this list, but in 2025, a surprising amount of economic tension has arisen between upstate New York and Canada, especially over trade and property. While NYC maintains a cosmopolitan image, rural counties are struggling, and they often point fingers north. Canadian trucking policies, for example, have created intense competition at key border crossings like Buffalo and Niagara Falls. American drivers complain of uneven inspection standards and lax regulations that allow Canadian haulers to operate more cheaply and take contracts away from local businesses. Then there's the real estate boom. Canadian investors have been buying up property in upstate New York at a record pace, turning farmland into vacation homes and boutique hotels. Local residents feel like they're losing control of their communities, and some towns have even tried to limit foreign property ownership. In political circles, Canada's strong stance on gun control, immigration, and climate regulation has made it a symbolic contrast, something New York politicians love to reference, for better or worse. But for the average resident, it often feels like Canada is all ideals and no consequences. Number 10, Florida. Yes, Florida. Sunshine, beaches, and simmering Canadian fatigue. Why? Because Canada sends more snowbirds here than any other country. While tourism is good for the economy, Floridians have increasingly complained about the seasonal influx of temporary residents who crowd hospitals, clog traffic, and drive up prices. Healthcare strain is a big one. Some Florida counties have seen surges in elderly Canadian patients who come down for extended stays and use emergency services, despite technically not contributing to the tax base. Local officials have quietly raised the issue in budget meetings, worried that the cost outweighs the benefits. There's also political tension. Canadians in Florida are often more vocal about U.S. politics than some locals, especially on gun laws, social justice, or immigration. That outsider commentary can rub people the wrong way. If you like Canada's system so much, one local quipped, why are you living here 6 months a year? And of course, there's real estate. As Canadian investment in Florida condos continues to rise, so do prices, pushing out first-time buyers and creating a silent class divide.